In a world where progress never sleeps, one company stands out as the driving force behind infrastructure and energy solutions. Introducing our fuel company and cement producer, where excellence meets efficiency. Jah Oil. The company have 30 filling stations across the country that are all operating, which includes the recently completed Yarambamba and Old Yundum filling stations. And our rates are relatively cheaper than anyone else across the country. Along the years, Jah Oil introduces importation and distribution of cement in their line of business to diversify and strengthen their operations. Are you a cement retailer? At the moment, Jah Oil is the biggest producer and distributor of cement in the country with the most competitive prices in the market. With a focus on sustainability and innovation, we are paving the way for a greener, stronger future. Trust in us to fuel your projects and lay the groundwork for success. We currently produce over 25,200,000 bags per year. As the largest cement producer in the country, Jah Oil also targets to export cement to the neighboring countries like Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, and others. Join us on our journey to shape a world where every drop of fuel and every bag of cement makes a difference. Together, we can build a brighter tomorrow.
It's Coffee Time with Peter Gomez on West Coast Radio on YouTube. Our program is sponsored by Jah Oil, and we are looking for more partners for this YouTube project. Now, last week, lawyer Usainu Dabo gave his first press conference of the year as Secretary General and leader of the United Democratic Party, UDP. And before taking journalists' questions, he discussed 7 key points centered mainly on the economy. Following the interview or the press conference, one of the party's strategists, Larry Sise, came on 2 Coffee Time programs to further elaborate on the press conference points and also ask questions of the Barrow government's economic policy. Well, Seedy Keita is the Finance and Economic Affairs Minister in that government. He's been keenly following the discussions both at the press conference as well as on Coffee Time, and he's on Coffee Time himself this morning, hopefully with all the answers to the UDP's questions about the Gambian economy. Seedy, welcome back to Coffee Time.
Thank you very much, Peter, and happy Ramadan to our Muslim
Ramadan
brothers.
Kareem. Indeed. Well, you know,
happy Lent to our Christian brothers and sisters. Thank you very much.
There's this joke about the Sise Kundan Cole that, they are very afraid of this particular month. I don't know about the Keitas.
Well, we do it in grace. It's a time for reflection. Yes.
Are you sure your boss is fasting?
Certainly. And
You're not covering for him?
No. He is a devout Muslim. He prays regularly on time, and he does fast regularly.
Fantastic. Good to have you this morning. I'm sure you have a lot to go through. Where do you want to start?
Well, I thank you very much, Peter, and thank you to your listeners. And we are very pleased as a government to hear the discourse about the budget discussion and the macroeconomic policies of the government, which is very encouraging. It shows more public engagement, and that is very useful. So it is our job to let the general public know we are here to serve them and what policies we put in place to implement the development aspiration. First of all, to begin with, I had, during the budget session, came to this program and explained the rationale of a budget and why a budget is developed. A budget is nothing but a reflection of government priorities. And as you know, those priorities of the government of His Excellency Adama Barrow is to serve the Gambian people. That's why in the 2025 budget has always been dubbed a people-centered budget. Why we do so, the priority allocation is to people-related matters and service delivery for the Gambians to usher in development. So on that note, we will say that the budget for 2025 has very low deficit compared to historic norms, which we have mentioned. And that is a huge achievement, because if you look at the all funds, our deficit is 1.46%. And if you look at only government-funded operation, GLF component is 0.1%, which is quite a remarkable achievement, and is taking into account of the fact that we do not want large budget deficit, which will encroach into borrowing more and more for our development needs. So what we have been hearing in all the discussions, and that's where our priority is, it has always been centered around expenditure. You know, all the comments I have had so far in terms of analyzing the budget is, and the discussions were to me sort of like not contextualized, because you don't discuss budget numbers by only quoting absolute numbers. In terms of comparison, you look at how the trend has been moving over time, what is the share of the budget in terms of the distribution to different sectors, as well as the peer comparison, regional or otherwise. What we've had was only we've given X to this sector, Y to that sector. These sectors are not adequately funded. As such, they are not reflecting our priorities, which is far from the reality. Because to develop a budget, you start with a baseline. And the baseline of any budget is your medium-term expenditure framework. By that, in a layman term, is what resource envelope you have at your disposal that you can distribute to your priority areas, which you believe will usher in the development aspiration you want as a government. And that is done, that cascades into allocation to sectors. And in so doing, you take cognizance of support that you get so as not to crowd out your limited government funds into areas which are very, very simple, which have a lot of donor funds. And as such, that is what formed the budget formulation process. It's very participatory. Sectors are invited, discussions are held. But the feedback we got is that, oh no, the particularly productive sectors, mainly fisheries, agriculture, tourism, youths are underinvested. Unfortunately, this is far from reality, because each of these sectors have access to resource envelope that we as government are aware. For example, the quote on agriculture being only awarded 950. In fact, one of them said 95, just for correction. It's not 95, it's 950 million as a pittance. That's not right. The agricultural sector has more than 5 billion support in form of grants from partners, from IFAD, World Bank, ADB, IDB, OPEC Fund, you name it. So if you have that, and most of the support in the agriculture sector are grant funds. So it's just to implement. And these support are from our development partners. That is why we take that on board, and fully cognizant of that fact, we support the agricultural sector from our limited government resources to the tune of 950 million. And you come to other sectors, like tourism. We were told that, tourism is supposed to be the backbone, and is, of course, contributing at least 20% of the GDP. As such, you should put all your firepower there. That's not reality. The tourism sector, the ministry, what you saw in the budget is the allocation to the ministry and the subvented entities under the ministry from government funding. But the tourism ministry is supported by the GT board. The GT board is the operational arm of the tourism sector. The GT board is responsible for the promotion, management, and advertisement of the Gambia as a tourism destination. So the GT board have access to resources through their own levies that they put on the sector. And as of 2023, they have more than 239 million that they raise, for which they have as spendable resources. So that is very limited. That's huge compared to what is given to the ministry proper as a policy arm. The Ministry of Tourism is the policy arm of the sector, but the implementation is done by the GT board. and the resources of the GT board are self-raised from the sector through the tourism levy. And not only that, we have partners in the tourism sector that are supporting us. The World Bank has supported the Gambia to develop tourism to the tune of $68 million over the next 5 years, and that is at various stages of implementation. Just recently, about 2 weeks ago, we just launched, His Excellency the President, Adama Barrow, has launched a 10 million euro YEP tourism project. So you cannot have all these resources into a given sector and then you compete out. Meanwhile, there are certain sectors that are not easily attracted to partners or funders. For example, the security, the Office of the President, your foreign services. Those must be funded from your own domestic resources. That is why those sectors tend to have relatively larger amount of the domestic resources than sectors which have access to partner support. Then the third sector that was mentioned as not reflecting the priorities that we deem as a government is the youth sector. And this sector is another area where it is not the ministry that is implementing the youth and sports policy operation. The ministry is focused on the policy aspect. Operations are in the area of sports, different sports fraternities, as well as the different sport like the GFF, the football, the basketball federation. Those are the operational arm, and these are supported. And the youth and sports as a ministry is supported by a youth and sports levy, which is levied on the GSMs. And as we speak, the average envelope accessible to those raised from the youth fund is about 90 million annually. So these are outside budgets. So when government is formulating a budget, it is not only what you see in the budget document, that is the resource envelope available to that sector. And of course, we believe that being in the country, they know how this mechanism work, because we all know how government work. But our doors are open, and the different ministries are open for consultation and to really give frank feedback on those. So these are some of the issues that we believe are deemed clarifying. And again, I'll come back to say the government of His Excellency Adama Barrow is focused on developing the country and the people. And that is why, if you look at our personnel emoluments, I mean, I cannot put the ranking of where we do stand as a country, but in spite of all the economic challenges in the region and globally, in the last 8 years, remuneration of the core civil servants have increased by 110%.
Oh, wow.
In 2019, 50%. In 2022, 30%. In 2025, another 30%. And in fact, the 2025 salary increase is not across the board, but rather has been graduated. And we came up with a floor of minimum $6,000 per month. No government civil servant is paid less than $6,000 monthly.
Including drivers?
Every messenger. So long as you are in the government payroll, you are not below 6,000.
Oh, that's very good.
And the salary increase, the lower grades had increases when you take into account more than 75%. So we cascade it according to the grade in order to address the issue of equity. Mm-hmm. So these are, and again, infrastructure. It is, people keep harping, why the emphasis on infrastructure by His Excellency Adama Barrow? It is empirically established. For every dollar you invest in infrastructure, the economic return and social returns are $4 extra. It's one of the highest rewarding investment. And the Gambia has a huge infrastructure deficit, and why so? Traditionally in the past, our infrastructure was left to the development partners. All development on roads, that's why it was. If you look at the Lamenkoto Pasamas, it took decades for it to be completed due to funding issues, partners. But the president, in his wisdom, has deemed it necessary that, look, we have to invest in our own development, and that is develop the infrastructure from government funds. And this is why, if you see, we are all beneficiaries of what it takes to drive on Batting Harding Highway. It has eased traffic congestion. If you look at the real estate development along that corridor, we've all seen buildings coming up which were which were not here before. So these are some of the things that we deem to clarify, just to make the people aware. So it is not that we are not focused on priority sectors, but those priority sectors have alternative funding sources. That's why government deem it necessary not to crowd out these partners. These are called partners in development. So if you have a partner that is helping you, why crowd out your limited resources when somebody can help you? And these are not, most of these sectors that I'm talking about are not financed by loans, principally. Most of the support in these sectors are grant funds. So that is why we believe to just look at the budget number and comment in abstract terms leaves much room for improvement in this.
But regard. The question has to be asked, Seedy.
Yes.
Do you always get the grant funds that are promised, whatever ministry or department or agency of government?
Well, these are linked to implementation. And that's why implementation is being looked upon seriously by government. As the implementation expedites, it is expedited more funds. In fact, one sector to quote here is the health sector, where the rapid implementation of the grants has enabled the World Bank to give additional funding to the sector. Because the partners operate on what do we call performance-based allocation system. The more you implement, the more resource envelope you'll have access to, because it shows that you are implementing the development for which you are set out to do, and resources are supposed to be directed to performers. Yeah. So we are improving and the implementation rate. And just again, I do hear that, even the budget support were not forthcoming. No, just for the information of the audience.
I was going to say,
I went to the National Assembly in August, in September thereabout, and said the budget implementation was slacked down because partner support as envisaged in the budget, in the form of budget support, have yet to arrive. And that was what was the case at the time. But we received all the budget support as of last year in the budget by December. So it depends on the timing, because these budget supports are linked to triggers, are linked to results. So as those results are implemented and your conditions for the budget supports are realized, then disbursement follow. So some of these do take time, and that's why it's not on day one in the budget that you'll have a budget support in the bank account waiting for you. Most of them are linked to reforms, and these reforms are long-lasting, and they are for the betterment of the economy and the country at large. So just for clarity, there was no budget support. In fact, last year, we had extra $10 million from the World Bank, over and above what we budgeted in the form of budget support, because we plead with them for the social package of GAMTEL and GAMCEL staff, which they rise to our request. So we received $10 million extra. So just to show that managing an economy is like jigsaw puzzle, you move one block at a time.
It's interesting you mentioned GAMTEL and GAMCEL, because these are institutions that came up during the press conference of the UDP. So how did that extra 10 million help the institution?
Well, no, that is the social package, because we all know GAMTEL and GAMCEL are going through reforms. And one of the identified causes of the challenges of those two companies are the human resource base. It was deemed that there are more people than it needs. And if you look at the number of staff counts compared to the comparative in the private sector, we all know that the head count are. So the social package will come and address that, so as that the parting Gambians in there will be given a decent golden handshake. That's the purpose of those projects.
But financially, how are these institutions? They are struggling, yes, but they are still around. And the reason I ask is I owed some money by GAMCEL, which I would like to recover ASAP.
I can put on record, this is where managing public enterprises has been a challenge for the government. And I think this is not just GAMTEL and GAMCEL. We have to look at the economic history of this country and look at things quietly and say them as they are. If you look at our public enterprises, we did not, as a country, have a very good track record. If you look at the number of public enterprises that has collapsed over the years, and this collapse had led to huge economic potential loss. I can start by naming some of them, which the audience will be able to relate with.
Sure.
GPMB, it was performing very well. It collapsed. NTC, Commercial and Development Bank, Agricultural Development Bank, Livestock Marketing Board. Then you have the GPTC, then on and on and on and on. So if you look, it's not that when a public enterprises go underwater, but is the opportunity lost? So it's time we look at, that's why we have created a state-owned enterprise commission to put a laser focus on how these enterprises are managed. As we speak, Gamcell, even government has to come and bail out the salary of Gamcell for the last 2 months. We, from the limited resources.
So they're still in bad shape.
Well, of course, that's why restructuring is being done.
I shouldn't go knocking on the door.
No. It's a work in progress, and we are aware. And I do hear, like, to say we're selling these public assets. No, there is no public asset that is sold in closed doors, behind closed doors. There is no, all these processes are...
But public assets have been sold publicly, have they?
Publicly.
Okay.
It depends on whether you or anybody who's making that comment has the right authorities. Because no public assets can be sold privately, because it is owned by the population. But there's a process. You advertise it, you invite bids are open, evaluated, and the best responsive bidder is the one who takes them.
Is that what happened in the case of Megabank? It came up for, focus.
Yes,
in the press
in fact, for the interest, this Megabank issue has been an issue going on. And I was surprised that in this day and age, people can fathom or think that a whole government can sell a whole bank that is owned by the state on the carpet.
Is that not what you did, the government?
Of course not. How would we do that? Look, government has certain ethos. It's a public asset. As such, whatever you do with that, the public have the right to know. The fact that a segment of society or an individual of society does not know how the transaction was done is no answer to the fact that it was done privately. For the case of Megabank, this has been widely debated, discussed, but we will tell you. Even one of the audience said that, he came to this studio and said in 2022, Megabank is being sold, and it was indeed when we announced sold in 2022. For purpose of records, that's not correct. Megabank transaction closed in 2023. And for the case of Megabank, if you will allow me to give the audience a detailed rundown of events leading to the
It's only quarter past
Megabank.
9.
Yes. The Central Bank of the Gambia, acting in accordance with an order of the High Court, see copy attached. These copies have all been lodged at the National Assembly, because the answer I'm reading out to you is an answer I have responded on the floor of the National Assembly, and all the reference annexures have been compiled and submitted to the National Assembly. The court order annex marked CBG1 reorganized the Keystone Bank Limited and obtained approval from the Registrar of Companies to change the name to Megabank Limited. Also, that approval was attached as an annexure pursuant to the reorganization plan approved by the High Court. This reorganization plan was court approved. It is not a government-imposed reorganization. See attached exhibit and marked CBG3. CBG made several previous attempts to exit from the bank, but to no avail. And I think it's very worth noting that it is not right for the central bank, who is a regulator, to be running a bank.
Yeah.
And that's why central bank literally took over to nurse the institution, prepare it and offload it. And exit from the mega bank, it is within that context that as a regulator, when banks go under, you bail them out, restructure them, and this is not unique to Gambia. It has happened everywhere. During the financial crisis, all US, UK, they all bail out their banks that were insolvent. However, the exit process gained traction following the coming into office in October 2020 of the current governor, because previous attempts were made, but only when Governor Boisedi came on board did the real exit mechanism
gain traction.
Momentum.
Yeah.
The new management of the central bank exhibited a strong resolve to dispose of the institution through services of an approved consultant, appointed consultant. It is not the central bank themselves that went out to do the sale. They have made bids to potential consultants who can be able to market this. And in September 2021, Central Bank approved GPPA, and the approval authority of the GPPA has been also submitted to appoint DT Associates to provide the sell-side advisory services on the privatization or disposal of the mega bank, following a competitive bidding process which attracted the following: Sahel Investment Management, Accord Associates, and A&A and Co. Following and I think A&A and Co. should be very familiar to the terrain that are making the accusation that it was a private transaction.
That's a dig at UDP.
Well, following an evaluation of the mega bank, DT Associates ran a competitive bidding process. And again, see copy of the newspaper advertisement, exhibit and marked as CBG 5 for the sale of mega bank in 2021, and received bids from the following 5. 1. Access Bank Gambia Limited, Vista Group Holdings, VFD Group PLC, Yes Brazil Bank, Afro Board Investment, GLM Investment Consulting and Real Estate, SALRL. This bidding process resulted in the selection of the most responsive bidder, which happened to have been Vista Group Holding, the current shareholder of Vista Bank Gambia Limited. Through an independent assessment of the institution, the interested bidders, that is the Vista Group, offered to pay 900 million instead of 600 million. We had that the bank was sold for 600 million. For correction, it is 900 at the time, the first offer, for the purchase of Mega Bank, then equivalent to $15 million. After drafting and finalization of a share purchase agreement between the potential buyer, that is the Vista Holding and the Central Bank, which was mediated by the consultant DT Associates, Central Bank communicated its acceptance of the negotiated price of 900 million via a letter dated November 23, 2022. See Exhibit. So these are all exhibits that have been presented. And the following conditions were agreed upon. 1, the payment of the full amount of 900 must be made by the bidder prior to the signing of the share purchase agreement, that the deadline for the payment was December 15, 2022. Failing which, the transaction will be null and void. So we had given the deadline for the sale to be completed in December 2022. Unfortunately, both conditions were breached by the potential buyer, that is the Vista Group, when they took the following steps, and hence rendering the transaction void. They made an initial payment of $5 million, which was received on December 30th, 2022. They made additional payment of $2.5 million. The central bank was informed through the consultant that the terms of the contract were varied by the potential buyer, that is the Vista Group, due to their decision to make 3 installment payments for the institution, starting with $5 million and $2.5 million. Records are available at the central bank to show that funds received all have been returned to the senders due to the void contract. However, the return of funds took a while due to the need to address concerns raised by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. While this was taking place, Central Bank was mindful not to open a new tender process until that previous transaction was fully determined. It was after that the DT consultant was instructed to commence another bidding process with a view to identifying a new buyer. DT Associates then ran a second bidding process, and this copy of the advertisement for the second bidding was also submitted for the sale of Mega Bank, and this attracted bids from the following: KM Holding Limited, Master Financial Group, and Oakwood Africa Investment Limited. After careful review of the submitted bid, DT Associates recommended to the central bank to explore concluding transaction for the sale of 100% equity in the Mega Bank with KM Holding, and the annexure of that transaction was also given. After the protracted negotiation, Central Bank, in a letter dated June 12, 2023, and not 2022, was informed KM Holding of their successful tender for the purchase of 100% of Megabank Limited. Subsequently, KM Holding and Central Bank signed a share purchase agreement bearing serial number 847/2023 MID. That was also attached, in which KM Holding Limited agreed to pay $15,250,000, which is an improvement of $250,000 over the previous offer of $15 million, and far in excess of both the initial 900 as well as the 600 that was alleged to have been the sale price. So this is how Megabank was sold. The advertisements were done, consultants were hired, a transparent process was conducted, GPPA was involved to identify the procurement of the consultant to do the procurement. So we must be very aware that whatever government does, it has to be in the public space, and there are laws and procedures guiding that. So it will, well, those are open to be asked, but this is the response I have given, and these responses are backed by facts, as mentioned in the various exhibits. So to say that Gambia government sold Megabank under the wraps or under the carpet is far from the reality.
And KM, they are from what country?
Well, KM is an investment company. I don't know their designated country. I am not part of the transaction. I am just relaying how the transaction was conducted.
Okay.
It's an international financial holding company.
Okay. And
Yes.
do you know if the bank is doing business? Is Megabank active, or are they still restructuring? And
Well, once we have exited as a government, the rest is a private matter.
Okay,
And
okay.
we are not privy to that.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well, other assets also, that belong to the government that have either been recycled or mortgaged, whatever the language used. We can come to those. Banjul Port, for instance, they're saying that, GPA has been sold off.
Well, I think we must, I don't know what you call a sale. These are concessions. And
Is a concession a sale?
No, absolutely. Okay. Concession is giving a right to an access for a party, apart from the government or another party, to have the right to use it in return for a compensation to the owner of the asset over a given period of time. So when you sell, title passes. I'm sorry if I sound a bit legal here.
That's okay.
A sale transaction, there is no recourse. It's a one-way transaction. When I sell you a car, you own that car. But when I lease the car to you, I retain the title. So leasing is a form of concession. So just that some of these concessions do take longer time over, because why the just periods are long? Because the investor would have brought in the capital and the know-how, which it will take time to recover. That's why the periods are longer. And that's why the share of the returns are a little bit lopsided. I do hear that if you sell something for 80-20, 60-40, it's like you are not acting in national best interest.
Let's go back to this 80-20, as it relates to, the Banjul Port.
I'm just telling you, Peter.
The overall contract. No, we want to understand. So when they say, you take the port and give it to Seedy Keita, all right, the country was benefiting 100%. Now Seedy keeps $80 of every $100 he makes. Is that the arrangement with Al Bayrak? What has
the shareholding in any concession is a reflection of two factors, principally the investment and the effort. When you concession,
how much is Al Bayrak's investment? When the Senegambia Bridge was going to Africa 50, we heard 100.
Yes.
And 100 never shifted.
Yes.
All right?
Yes.
What Al Bayrak brought to the table?
Well, Al Bayrak is not as straightforward as Senegambia Bridge, because it is linked to the development of a large infrastructure that is the deep sea port in Sanyang. So you will see the revenue sharing as well as the period is all influenced by the capital investment the investor would put in to develop the deep sea port in Sanyang. That's why that ratio was realized. So in return, what you are getting from the Al Bayrak transaction is 20% of the current revenue at the ports. In addition, at the end of the concession period, you will have a fully developed port built under the concession by Al Bayrak. That is why you have a 30-year concession period and a larger share of the revenue. And simply, you can, how much would it have cost you to build a deep sea port on your own if you were government? That is the foregone revenue that you have ceded to Al Barak for them to get the 80%.
Was this ever calculated, how much it would have cost government to...
Of course, this is how this, I think...
And what's that figure?
I don't have the transaction off my head, but I want to just assure the listeners, nobody will do a concession without modeling the cash flows. And I have heard in this place that, oh, if government does not know how to negotiate these contracts or this concession, let us ask. While we may not prefer or profess to know it all, but we do also take our safeguards. We make sure that best practice of the industry is invoked in any transaction. And in the case of the port transaction specifically, I don't want to deal a lot with the ports because that's a sector, but as a minister, I ought to know, and I'm giving you the answer. A transaction advisor was hired to support both the government position, because the transaction advisor's role is to advise the government on structuring the transaction so that the best interest of government. And that's not only that. It's not only the transaction advisor advice that will be taken. The government also have experts in the Ministry of Works, in the Ministry of Finance, that will look at this transaction and look at it from national best interest. So when you have the port and you said, oh, 80-20, no, that's not the only payoff. How about the deep sea port that will be built in Sanyang, which is a part of the concession agreement? So not only are you getting 20% of the current revenue, but also you're going to get a fully developed infrastructure of a deep sea port in Sanyang. And these are all enshrined in the contract. So to assume that, you have novices who have no idea or no capability we are not just resting on our laurels and assuming we know it all, but we are also procuring expert advice from the market to ensure that this type of transaction that we go into are well structured for the best interest of the country.
As Minister of Finance, you may not be the right officer to ask this question, whether this deep sea port in Sanyang will ever be built, given the difficulty now with the locals as to access.
Well, those are social aspects of the project, but the investment rationale is there, and that if we want to inform the profit sharing and the concession period.
And just, worst case scenario, were the port not to be built, how will that affect this 30-year lease of
that's where the agreement will be looked at, because those are conditions enshrined in the agreement. If defaults happen, that's like you negotiate the contract. And there are various ways, our legal team, we hope we don't get there. But in the event that that did not happen, because that formed the basis of the cash flow projections, that formed the basis of the revenue sharing, and that formed the basis of how much it will take to invest. So we don't know. All these are future events. If, God forbid, in the unlikely event it doesn't happen, because the contract has conditions.
Because that's what's in it. For us, it's the deep sea port.
Of course.
Because already Al Bayrak has taken on, an entity that is making money.
Of course. I think this is like you are foregoing current revenue for long-term asset investment. So that's it. But I'm just giving you how these type of transactions are structured. And we can go on and on. But be rest assured, best talent of government is deployed to any transaction of a long-term nature like this.
Going on would take me to the Senegambia Bridge, or what, purists like me would want to keep calling the Transgambia Bridge. What's the latest on that bridge, and how do you respond to criticisms that, the facility has been given out, for 25 years for just 100 million when we could have made 300 million, 3 times the amount we're trying to get from, the concession agreement?
Well, I listened to that and I was laughing. And
why?
Because the person who said so said a similar number about Nawek, which was out of line. So if an asset that took 98 million to build, in less than 5 years you can offload that for threefold, that must be a gold mine, or that must be a gambling scenario. How would we be able to sell an asset that was constructed at a cost of 97 million. In less than 5 years, you sell it for 300. I mean, we are not actually, like I said at the beginning, these are concession agreements, and no sale has taken place. I don't know what type of investor. Title has not passed. The Senegambia Bridge is a Gambia government-owned bridge. Title is vested in the Gambia government and is domiciled and is immovable. I don't think any investor would invest and not be sure that, like, if it is a sale, you don't have title. If it is a sale, we should have done the sale. Our documentation would say Senegambia Bridge from this date onwards now belong to Africa 50. But we did not sign a sale agreement. We signed a concession agreement, and the bridge lifespan is more than 50 years. The concession is for 25 years, half of the lifespan. And we structured this transaction in such a way that it is return driven. If the return target IRR, that is target internal rate of return of 15%, is realized by year 10 or 15, an assessment will be done. If the investors have realized their target return, the asset will revert back to the state. So at that stage, and in fact, what is happening now, people using that route are seeing construction on site. The toll plaza is being built, both the north side and the south side. And I can tell you, this is why there is so much noise about asset recycling, because it's a force of its kind. And since we've launched in Africa here, since we launched it last week, we received 7 executive directors of African Development Bank on a country tour. And one of the key attractive factors was, let's go and find out this Senegambia Bridge that we financed for a grant that is now being asset recycled, giving the country 100 million, and yet still the bridge will be there to provide the services of easing the transportation. You see, so if it was a wrong transaction, we have not done this transaction with a private entity. We've done it with an entity, that is Africa 50, which is majority owned by African Development Bank. And it's African Development Bank that gave us the bridge as a grant. So bad faith is not on the table. And these are not profiteering organizations. They are development institutions. And this is the way forward that is being tried now to introduce private management of public assets. Because we've all seen how many public infrastructure has been allowed to collapse and under public management. So the vogue in town now is to introduce the private sector to managing public infrastructure. One, the longevity of the asset is preserved, efficiencies will be there, more revenue will be mobilized. And what we are hoping with this transaction is not just only a financial transaction in terms of better management of the asset, but it's also a financial management tool. Because simply with the infrastructure being deployed, we'll be able to see for every revenue what has been the cost driver. Like, for example, for every time, if they tell me we generated 10,000, that 10,000 will be translated into how many cars, how many bicycles, how many motorcycles, how many lorries. That will bring about accountability. As we speak, even though we had improved efficiencies, but that is a work in progress. And we do not have the infrastructure or the technology to deploy as government to be able to do that granular breakdown of traffic in the form of cities, cameras, to scan the vehicles and ensure that what revenue is to be collected is collected. So these are all tools to, in a nutshell, a digital management, introducing digitalization to enhancing public resource management. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay,
you spoke about Africa 50,
yes.
Which is tied to the Africa Development Bank. Afrixim.
Yes.
I mean, you're supposed to be, in negotiations with them, or maybe it's far advanced. About what, $75 million that they're supposed to give to us. You want to update us on that?
Well, I had two versions of this. One, I had NRA was raising $75 million.
Yes.
No, GRA initially. What I had in the first press conference was GRA.
Or maybe slip of the tongue.
Yeah, that was what I had.
Yeah, okay.
I was in there,
Yeah.
but I listened.
But on this
it is
program,
NRA.
it was NRA. Yes,
it is
definitely.
NRA that is doing. And again, this is not direct government borrowing. As we know.
And that seems to be where the difficulty is.
You see, I think people are, well, maybe partly the ministry need to communicate more.
Yeah.
But I do know that the central bank has been widely communicating since the launch of the capital market. The capital market has been launched, it's functional.
Yeah, we've spoken extensively about the capital market.
This transaction that they are talking is not even consummated yet. It's a work in progress, but it's not any government borrowing.
But it shows they have information.
Of course, but we are not hiding. Because once, Peter, this is a capital market transaction. Whatever is in the capital market, it has to be transparent. It has to have, every market participant should have access to equal information. So we cannot do a capital market transaction as a government and then assume that it should be privy to a limited circle. No. NRA has revenue sources through the fuel levy, which is, steady, and as such, it can raise revenue in the capital market that will allow it to continue its work. As such, there is no government. First of all, for government to borrow any funds, if it is an obligation on the government, the Minister of Finance is required, if it is a borrowing, to lay that before the National Assembly for ratification. So you cannot do any borrowing transaction under the wraps, as we are saying, oh, we are under disclosing our obligations. No. This is a capital market transaction, which is a work in progress, and is raised, a prospectus was developed, this was shared, and Africa Exim Bank is looking at the transaction, and they will invest based on the credit merit of the transaction. So if the 75 million is invested, it's going to be invested by Africa Exim Bank,
yes,
into the bonds issued by NRA based on the underlying revenue pool that NRA generates to service those over time. So this is the nature of the transaction. There is nothing that, there is no obligation.
So nothing's been closed out yet?
No, this is a work in progress as we speak. And it's a capital market transaction, and capital market transaction must be very distinguished from private transactions, where it's between two parties. And government cannot go into any private transaction, because by very nature of government finances, everything must be in public domain. So to say that we are borrowing discreetly 75 million and not disclosing it, and we even hear that, oh, Senegal, misreport, all of these things we hear, it's not right. This is a work, and Africa Exim Bank is also a multilateral development bank. You see, there are certain things that are a given. If you deal with a private party, then you can put bad faith as one of your due diligence checklists, or, KYC, who to know. But when you deal with a multilateral institution of which you are a shareholder yourself, those are a forgiven. Those are
so
a
the
given.
Gambia is a shareholder in Afrexim Bank.
Oh yes, certainly. Otherwise, they will not do transaction with us. So I think this must be very well understood, that if you deal with a multilateral, and all multilateral institutions, shareholder agreements have been ratified duly by the National Assembly. So there is no dealing you can have. And in fact, we invite every party to where this suspicion raised. If this transaction closed, the full detail will be available, because Afrexim is a publicly owned institution, it's a multilateral, and I don't see any benefit of making this transaction so hidden, as if, I heard that, they are doing this, then they are not telling the people. The transaction is a work in progress. It is a capital market transaction. Anybody can write to the Capital Market Authority of the Central Bank and ask for the details of the transaction. So, but of course, I think it is telling us we need to communicate more,
Yeah.
and we will continue to do so, and hence we are here.
On the issue of writing to the capital market of the central bank,
Yes.
I can assure you one person who will do that as we speak will be Madi Jobate. He's probably in that process. right
Well,
now.
his doors are open. His doors are open, yes.
What about the Islamic Development Bank? Did the Gambia contract a loan of about what, $2 billion without disclosure? I mean, telling us about this thing in December of last year.
No, actually, I was intrigued. Again, I'll come back. Any loan obligation cannot come into force without it being ratified. There is no way Gambia government can contract a loan with the Islamic Development Bank without a ratification. This loan was ratified in the month of December 2024, after the budget was done. And I had that, we did not disclose it in the budget. How could you disclose it in the budget when the transaction was consummated after the budget? As you speak, we are discussing several transactions. We don't know whether they'll mature or not. You only enter things in the budget that you are sure of to avoid ambiguity. So the National Assembly is a public institution. The ratification instrument was laid, it was debated, and duly authorized. So how could we have contracted $2 billion, which was actually about $36 million precisely? This is for the third phase of the Batin-Hardin Highway. This is going to do the side roads. So you'll have a 10-lane highway, 6 on each side, 5 on each side. You have 3 currently, you'll have 2 here, and then there'll be a flyover there in the Sukuta Jabang that to unbundle that bottleneck, and there'll be pedestrian crossings that will all be developed. So that is the purpose of the loan facility, and it was done in broad daylight and duly ratified by the National Assembly members. And I'm surprised the parties saying this have members in the National Assembly. The least one could have done was consult. Well, you are my MP, you are my National Assembly member. We are talking about this before we go public. Because what I'm saying here is in public domain. I tabled it before the National Assembly. National Assembly ratified it, and it's in public domain. There is no public finances that are under the wraps. Whatever we do as a government, we are working in public interest. So what is the payoff for any participant of government to keep a government transaction private? Are you making any private gain? I'm not aware, because there is no compensation mechanism that by keeping a public transaction that will accrue to an individual. Procurement is done according to procurement laws, procedures are followed. But the fact that a party or a constituency is not aware is not an illustration that is not public.
Okay. All right. We're talking to Seedy Keita, Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs. Apart from Gamcel, what other state assets might be being considered either for recycling or concessionary agreements?
Well, as we speak, these state public assets have 2 key functions. One, public service delivery, and at just enough return not to be a drag on the public purse, or in the ideal scenario, to pay dividend to government. In all the institutions that are...
Well, NAWEC is a long way off that.
Yeah, exactly.
Paying dividend to government.
In fact...
So why do you continue, pouring funds into NAWEC?
Because
when we know that they are...
The country cannot do without energy. Imagine there's no electricity in this country.
What if the country, energy was to be produced and sold privately?
But that's the model we are working on. In fact, you are reading the strategy of the government. Yeah, because that is what's enshrined in the National Energy Roadmap.
You've traveled, you've gone to first countries where electricity and water is not provided by the state.
In fact, this is exactly what I wanted to say.
Okay.
These public assets that they're saying we are offloading to the private, we are selling our national strategic assets. Heathrow is not owned by the British government.
True.
Gatwick is not owned by the British government. True. I don't know of any telecom in UK or US that's publicly owned.
Yeah.
Those days have gone when the public will be in charge of managing this type of assets. So
So,
The
so GCA.
No, I'm coming.
GCA.
I'm coming. I'm just trying to explain. It's development is a journey. You learn from the people ahead of you. What we are doing is not unique to us. The model we are being advocated to keep strategic. What is so strategic more than an airport to any country? But as we speak, Heathrow, Gatwick are in private hands. This is public information. Anybody can verify. So if we keep on clutching on to state assets that are underperforming and they are a drag on the public force, and also they are not rendering the services expected, that means you are doing disservice to your population. Better allow the private sector to come in, regulate the sector, let them perform better, they employ more Gambians, and then you'll get your returns, either in the form of concession or privatization proceeds or the payment of dividend or taxes. There is no loss to government. So long as an operation is in your country, you stand to gain. Because the private sector, we all know, bring in efficiencies. Those efficiency gains go beyond just dollars. It goes to even reflect the quality of life, the service. Because who thinks about a power outage in the West? But how many of those power companies are owned by the government? So when they said, and we are not doing this, this is not a desire of government to just put on the chopping block assets simply because we believe we cannot manage them. A case in point was, ports was better managed. But what was the alternative? If it were in the private hand, what could it not have done? The ports in the entire trust of West African coast, how many ports are in public hands? Perhaps Gambia and very few, maybe Gambia and Guinea-Bissau. Dakar has gone. I mean,
DP World.
DP World, all of these things. So when we are doing things, simply, and that's what government policy is about. Government policy is about the conviction of the government, conviction of the president and the cabinet to steer the affairs of the country. And of course, alternative views can be heard, but this is not supported by facts. Because if what we are doing, meanwhile, this prescription we have been told, keep them. I have just named for you litany of companies that were in public management that have collapsed. And for each of those, cotton ginnery, NTC, commercial and development, but I named a couple of them. What is the economic loss to the country if these were orderly privatized, performing the service for which they are set out for, and employing more Gambians? I think that's where the comparison should be.
My question still has not been answered. Apart from Gamtel Gamcel, what other institutions might be being considered for either recycling or concession?
Well, this is at the sector level.
I hear about the Friendship Hotel, for instance, the Stadium Hotel, in other words.
Yes. The Friendship Hotel is on the leasing. Again, it's not sold. It's the management. And in fact...
you already found...
It's on the leasing.
Oh, okay.
That's what's being proposed.
Oh, okay.
That's the approach.
So you're looking for somebody to lease it to?
Yes.
Okay.
It's not like...
Okay.
If you go to even these hotel chains...
Okay.
Let me just explain.
Yeah, go ahead.
Even if you go to a hotel like Hilton does not own that building in a number of instances. They are owned by investors. But Hilton bring in its hotel management capability and the investors of that infrastructure lease it to them to manage it, and they share the profit. So this is how it works.
Okay.
It's not like... But I want to explain and emphasize, if we keep repeating what has been done since 1965 to date and has not delivered returns or results, so continue that trajectory might not cut it out for us. Rather, let's experiment, not just experiment for like theory. No, these are serious investment, serious decisions, serious analysis are put into it. And what we are, the direction being taken is not unique to Gambia. I quoted for you developed countries. I'm sure if I tell you the Banjul International Airport will be conscious, they say, again they are selling.
No.
But meanwhile, I've told you.
Exactly. Exactly.
I'm just telling you.
When you explain it this way and people understand it, if they hear tomorrow, somebody else is managing the Banjul International Airport, there will be no noise.
But that's why I said I don't blame anybody. I think that's what governance is all about.
When will GRTS be up for concession?
Well, well, I have no idea. That depends on the sector, depending on what the sector believes. Yes.
All right, we're talking.
And you could have done a very good job as a private investor to turn it around if it is not performing. Why not?
Is it performing?
Well, I think we're happy with it so far.
Okay.
I'm not in the sector.
You still give them millions every year.
Yes.
Nobody gives me anything.
But you see, that's where the efficiency is all about. With that million, with your expertise, if you are managing it, maybe you could have done more.
Or maybe I should try to sell West Coast Radio over to them.
In fact, Peter, that's how economies develop. If you look at the way the world works, you have all these companies, Microsoft, Google. They are not just the same Microsoft or the Google. No, they grow by acquisition. They acquire companies. They acquire technologies. They acquire sales. That's how development is fostered.
So GRTS should try to acquire West Coast Radio.
I don't know if they will make it better. Why not? It's good for you and good for the country. Yes.
All right, we are talking to any other thing, because I want to take a quick break. Then I'll come to the audience questions.
Yes. So, one question I want to explain.
Yes.
Is so far all the comments I've had about the budget focus on expenditure analysis, expenditure distribution. But the one thing, which is this number one aspect of the budget I've not had,
what resource mobilization.
Which is the revenue side.
Okay.
And I think this is one of the biggest achievements of this government. In 2022,
yes, the
tax revenue was 11.6 billion. In 2024, it's 20.8 billion. We're talking about an increase of 79% in 2 years. So I think this is a laudable achievement of His Excellency Adama Barrow's government and under the leadership of the President, because the credit goes to him. He allowed the reforms that form the basis of this quantum leap in revenue performance to be rolled out. And he is a hands-on person. He's a businessman. He brings his business acumen to analyzing some of these transactions for the information of the audience. So a budget analysis is incomplete by looking at one side of the equation. It must look at how those expenditures are funded. And the government of the Gambia has increased the domestic resource mobilization. In fact, for your information, we have been touted in the recent macroeconomic outlook launched by the African Development Bank. I was one of the panelists. It was myself from Gambia and the Minister of Finance of Ethiopia. And the question posed to me is, what are the strategies your government have put in place to witness these quantum leaps in domestic resource mobilization? It's more resilient, it's more sustainable, and it's more predictable. So I think, yeah, of course, they cannot, because the whole emphasis of the discussion I saw was to water down government, to say like we are misallocating resources, not prioritizing where we should put priorities. But the key achievement for me in the short term has been the domestic resource mobilization and the resilience. Most of this road infrastructure, as we speak, are financed domestically. And that is a huge achievement. And I would want the public to help government to ensure the integrity of revenue collection so that everybody has a stake.
How can they do that?
Well, to make sure that if you go to the shop, for example, your invoice is without a VAT, you ask the shopkeeper, is this a VAT invoice? Why is my VAT? Then that way, the accountability mechanism must be a bottom up.
If you sold a product that should have this sticker and it's not on it.
And you have no idea what quantum leaps we've witnessed. In a normal steady state, when you launch a reform, you expect an increase of performance by 20-30%. But when we launch these digitalization reforms, some of the jumps have been in 5 folds. And this is without any imposition of new taxes, without any increase of the tax rates. All we are doing is to enhance compliance, to ensure that what is for government should come to government.
On that issue of not, introducing new taxes,
yes.
We had this conversation recently
yes.
over flour, coming from outside.
Yes.
You remember this short period when we had the bread shortage, when the Bakers Union wanted to increase the price of bread by over 25%.
Yes.
the explanation I understood was they were querying, the money they had to pay for these stickers. This is on
the excise stamp.
Yeah, the excise stamp. This is on top of whatever other payments were there before. So this excise stamp is a new cost on top of.
No, the excise stamp is not that expensive. It's about
even if it is half a butut, it's extra cost.
But that extra cost has twofold payoffs, not only to government in terms of enhanced revenue, just to make sure that what is excisable is excised, but also for the owner of the factory, so that pilferages will be determined.
Well, they don't see it that way.
But
they're paying extra.
No. If you look at the economics of it, if you are operating in a factory like that, such losses are normally a factor of your cost. But with this digitalization, if they've been keeping track, they would have realized that the loss has gone down significantly. And I think, in a nutshell, those efficiencies internally accruing to themselves is what they stamp.
All right.
Yes.
Seedy Keita is with us. It's almost 10 o'clock. He's still here. We will keep him here until 11 if necessary. We're going to take a break, not for coffee, because we can't take any coffee or tea right now, but a necessary one to remind all viewers and listeners that the program is sponsored on YouTube. Our sponsor is Jah Oil. We're still here, coffee time with Peter Gomez. It's not every day that you can get the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs into the studio, not just explaining, but also willing to take questions from the audience. And that is why we are very happy to extend the program this morning. We will be here until 11 o'clock if we have to, and then at 11 o'clock we will leave the studio only because Imam Sheikh Tijan Cham, who launched his program last week, will be here to continue the conversation on Muslim marriages during the month of Ramadan. Just to confirm that we have started receiving your questions, and we will go through them, as many as we can, but we still have some unfinished business. During the break, it occurred to me that there was also the outstanding matter of the millions of euros that were taken from the Social Security and Housing Finance Corporation, an entity I insist government has no business dipping its hands into its funds because it doesn't contribute, in order to buy buses. I'm sure you heard you heard the claim. How do you respond to that?
Thank you very much. Yes, of course, I do hear that government, I don't know whether force or insisted or took Social Security money to buy buses, which is far from reality. What actually happened was Social Security, first let's establish the relationships. Social Security is principally funded by the employees through their contribution, but of course underwritten by government.
Private sector employees.
But underwritten by government. Last of my life, anything happens and Social Security goes insolvent, government will have to come and do a bailout. Yes, it's underwritten. So that is the relationship. That's why there is government oversight. That's why it is, like, for example, we can say it's a company limited by guarantee, sort of, whereby the shareholder, you do not put money, but because of underwritten commitment that you have towards that company, you take
like
ownership.
You're the guarantor.
Yes, you are the guarantor. That's why government ownership comes in. But it's not in the form of any cash injection. Okay. Just to clarify that.
That educates even me.
Yes, that's what they call. You have different type of companies. You have companies by incorporation, by shareholding payment, and companies limited by guarantee. That's the type of relationship. And also to distinguish that GTSC is 100% subsidiary of Social Security.
In other words, owned by Social Security.
100% wholly. So transactions between GTSC and Social Security are parent-subsidiary relationship. Government, in its oversight role, can look at void or issues in the economy and direct an entity like Social Security to say, please do this. But that doesn't mean government is dictating. It's identifying a gap that needs to be addressed and Social Security can be encouraged to. But of course, Social Security has to do their own due diligence, verify to make sure it can be done, because it's an investment. And the particular issue here is parent-subsidiary relationship with government of the transaction. So when that transaction was consummated, which was about 9 million euros,
Yeah.
we had that translate to 70 buses. At the particular moment in time, I'm sure the audience will take note, there used to be transport strike all the time in this country. School buses were not regularly available. Not to talk of underserved communities. So government is all about service delivery. That is why, in his wisdom, it was directed that Social Security...
In whose wisdom?
The president, the leadership of the executive, to say, look, Social Security can do this because this is a subsidiary that you're managing and they are in the transport sector. And don't forget, GTSC, prior to this transaction, have on their own account purchased buses and they are rendering services, but the bus fleet was not enough. That was why government literally, we can say theory, practically advised Social Security to do this. And that came to 70 buses for 9 million euros. So the issue is they said government should have, took a loan. There is no financial transaction between the government and Social Security or GTSC in this transaction. It is purely resources from Social Security to GTSC to procure buses. Government is only sitting as a big brother overseeing the...
And whatever profits GTSC
makes its GTSC goes to Social Security. That is the transaction.
Okay.
So, in addition to the 70 buses, consistent with the president's vision to say that social service is a key pillar of his agenda, government on its own account bought 30 buses and delivered that to social...
Without taking a single butut from
our own
Social
resources.
Security.
That's from government resources.
Okay.
30 buses, that translates to $4.5 million. So the fleet that we are talking about is 100 buses. 70 financed by Social Security, 30 financed by the government. And what happens when this issue of recoverability happens, the discussion was, I was asked this question. We said, look, this transaction is between a parent and a subsidiary. But knowing that public transport globally is subsidized, government in its wisdom, and in fact this decision was made by His Excellency the President, felt that, look, we should come to the support of Social Security. And we will, GTSC, because these buses are not run for free. The buses are making money.
Yes.
So when you have 30 buses that is procured for you, so government decided to write off 50% of its own buses and will support 50% of the share of the Social Security investment in those buses. And we are very pleased with the outcome so far. School buses are available, University of the Gambia buses are available, and underserved communities have access to bus service. For the first time, in the URR, you have bus services. I understand today you can have people from Wuli coming to Basse for shopping and going back to Wuli to cook for the day. All through this GTS.
Previously, it wasn't possible.
When you look at investment, any pension fund, you invest to preserve your asset base in order to defray the obligation of your future pension obligation. But in return, you also do social services. This is what we call corporate social responsibility. So it is not that government has gone to Social Security, dipped their hands into the monies and said, we'll buy buses. No, the transaction had no party to government. It was between Social Security and GTSC, and if they want any inquiry, they can even ask Social Security and GTSC, how were the buses procured? They have all their procurement documents. Government was not a party to the transaction. All government role was nudge Social Security to say, this is a void in society, please fill it this way. And we are pleased, since this fleet has been in operation, we have not had any transport strike. Before these buses, sometimes I remember we used to be called, oh, there will be a transport strike by the transporters. That is not the case. So it has satisfied a social need in a financially responsible manner, and government cognizance with the social nature of the transaction has come in to subsidize to the tune of 50%. So I don't see where the outreach of government dipping its hand into the pockets of pensioners' money.
All right.
I was even instructed that I should pay the loan. I said, which loan? How would I have contracted a loan without it being ratified?
Well, you just mentioned 50 there. We're going now to the questions coming from the listeners. Good morning, Uncle Peter. Kindly ask the Honourable Minister to highlight on the financial gain of the Gambia government from the Senegambia Bridge since its mortgage to Africa 50.
Well, thank you very much. We have received the first tranche of the disbursement, which was 15 million. And the subsequent tranche is expected shortly. The toll infrastructure is being built, and we believe once the operations start in earnest, government will benefit from increased employment of Gambians. We'll have tax revenues that will accrue to us, and we are shareholder in the company, in the SPV, will get 12.5% of any dividend accrued. These are the financial gains.
Assalamu alaikum, Uncle Peter. Can you ask the Minister how the budget implementation process is progressing so far? How is transparency and accountability for every penny of taxpayers' money being ensured, especially given the wasteful nature of public spending in this country?
Well, we're working on that. We are implementing the budget diligently. And in fact, the expenditure demands far exceed the resource envelope because mindful of the deficit level of the budget at only 1%, we have very limited room in terms of the revenue expenditure mismatch. So what we tend to do every month, we tend to allocate based on the revenue collected. That's why the budget is how the budget is implemented. And we are also trying to improve public expenditure management through digitalization. Now, not when we say public expenditure management, we are looking to make sure that there is value for money. The new GPPA Act has come into force, GPPA 2022, that has given enhanced transparency to the procurement process. And we are also trying our best to ensure that we are looking as close to source as is possible. Typically, one example is the procurement of textbooks. We have now engaged the government printer to be printing the textbooks instead of distributing it across different schools in the country. So in a nutshell, these are some of the reforms. And one area we are working on very well is to enforce the adoption of the Integrated Financial Management System, IFMIS, in the government finances. Because we all know when transactions are off the system, there is more tendency of it not being aligned to spending priorities.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, good luck with that.
Yes.
Good morning, Uncle Peter and Finance Minister. Thank you for your presence in the National Bantaba Coffee Time with Peter Gomez. Is that the new name of my program, National Bantaba? Question 1. The Finance Minister said remuneration is 110% over 8 years. What is the percentage cost of living over the same period? What is the percentage cost of living over the same period? And question 2, how many more national assets are there for this government to sell? Now I am worried. And they sign off 2026, Barrow must go. Obviously not a friend of the government, but let's deal with the questions.
Well,
110% over 8 years, what is the percentage cost of living over the same period?
Well, I will not be able to quantify how the cost of living has, because cost of living is a function of individual and family size. Mm-hmm. You know, generally we believe we've done well as a government to increase salaries by this quantum over a short period of time. This is unprecedented. Regardless of the increase, elsewhere, what you think about when you talk about remuneration increase, basically you're talking about 3, 4, 5% max annually. But to max out 110, which is like 14% annually, is very much in line. In fact, historically, apart from the elevated inflation of 2024, our inflation was on the double digits. So safely, we could say the increase outstripped the inflation rate. Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And question number 2, how many more national assets are out there for he's using sell, I suppose?
I think what one people should understand, it's not the desire of government to sell these institutions if they are performing. Honestly, Ethiopian Airlines is a 100% owned company by the government of Ethiopia.
Yes.
And I don't think Ethiopia will ever think about selling it because it is performing. The issue that triggers this transaction to be considered is service delivery and performance. Because it's a double whammy. You keep it, look at what happened to Gamtel. As we speak, government is supporting their salary. How can we take...
Yeah, because government again is to be blamed, for liberalizing the gateway. I mean, that was the one thing they held on to. All these other GSM companies were paying to them while they were still doing good business. I mean, you liberalize the gateway, they are doing better business. And the question is government realizing more from liberalizing the gateway?
I think we look at this. In fact, for your information, Gamtel transaction is one transaction I looked at very closely. And I allocated a lot of time to read. I sat with the digital minister. What we realized was Gamtel is the backbone.
Yes.
The tariff that Gamtel set over the years has never been revised. All these years. If only Gamtel has revised those rates, they would have been in a financially better situation. Just look at NAWEC. I mean, their financial situation has improved, albeit compared to the past, through the tariff increase. So Gamtel tariff has not been revised.
Yeah, you could have advised them to increase.
No, but we only knew about it now, after the fact. And that's the role of management.
Yeah, but what about the gateway?
No, the gateway, I mean, globally, this liberalization is not unique to Gambia. I'm not a telecoms expert to look at how the gateway liberalization will affect
because
the
that's what they all cry about.
No, that's what they, but look at what happens elsewhere. Because you see, whatever is happening in Gambia is not unique to Gambia. If you go elsewhere, there is nothing called national telecom company. It's all in private hands. So how are they managing? You see, I don't have sector expertise to comment on the merits of the liberalization.
So Sonatel is now not run by the Senegalese government?
It's largely private investment in Sonatel.
Okay.
Orange is a major shareholder in
Sonatel.
Yes. Look, the way forward, this is not unique to us. This issue of keeping assets that are underperforming, under-delivering, and aborting, do you believe some of these parastatals, some of these public enterprises, are not even able to pay their tax obligation to the government?
Yeah, we know that.
So, it's not our desire. If any public asset is performing over and above what is expected or what a similar privately managed company, why would government consider even thinking selling it? Because you don't lay your goods that lay the gold. You don't sell your goods that lay or kill your goods that lay the golden egg.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're only about performance and results as a government. If anybody can bring this to the table, why not? I mean, it's not an individual decision, but this is the direction that, because I have mentioned for you litany of companies that have collapsed. And if we had taken the time to look at the opportunity cost to our national development, we came through the collapse of this institution. Imagine NTC was in operation. You think we'll be talking about price control? It would have been a big player in the market to be the market price setter.
Try reintroducing the NTC model.
Well, it has not worked. So if we reintroduce it through the public approach, it might not work again.
No, but
Peter, that is what it means. You see, in mathematics, that's what they call law of induction. You do something once, you do it twice, you do it 3 times, then you establish that the pattern. So if I have mentioned you 8 companies on the public ownership that have not performed, and you are now telling us introduce another one? Well, I don't think that's good advice.
Okay. Your colleague, Ibrahim Asila, remember that government also gets 4% of gross revenue of the concession annually. Explain that to...
well, you know, there are 2 types of returns.
Yeah, this is about the Banjul port, by the way.
Yes, this is a Banjul port. There are 2 types of returns. You have the top line, that is the gross revenue, which is 4%. And why 4%? Because the projections that was done indicate that the revenue will be increasing significantly under this new concession. And the shareholding will be in the dividends. So you'll have 2 returns. Return on the gross, as well as the share of the net profit, which is the 20% of the net profit, which will be distributable. But thank you, Honorable Silla, for just bringing that. That's another significant source of revenue to the government from this transaction.
A former minister, it's not Demba Jawo, because every time I say former minister, people think that it's Demba Jawo. This is not D.A. Jawo. Yes. Can you ask the Honorable Minister if the requisite consultative engagements from the social perspective were undertaken? This is about Sanyang now. If that was the case, I doubt if the residents of Sanyang would have been making the noise they are. Project finance requires that all the relevant prerequisites bordering on social, political, environmental, and commercial be undertaken before they even get to the negotiating phase of the project. As a country, we need to avoid all avenues that could lead us to the risk of future withdrawals from such projects when they either begin to fail or have new governments opting out of them on the basis of badly negotiated deals. Again, it's unfair to just lumber all this on you. This would have been this would have been best answered by Silla himself. He's listening. He might just want to. Silla, you've heard the question. I guess it's due diligence that he's asking.
No, basically what he's talking about is right. Yeah. In fact, this they call it ESG, environmental, social, and governance aspect of investment. That means that the stakeholders, particularly the project-affected persons, views and concerns are taken on board. You carry them along the project to show them that they are shareholders, they are stakeholders, how the profit will accrue to them, or if the project will affect them adversely, what mitigants you'll bring to the table. That is right. It's lessons learned, and I'm sure my colleague minister in the Ministry of Transport and Infrastructure has his work cut out for him to do the needful in this regard.
Good morning, Peter. Tell your guest that Gambians are never happy with government because of rampant corruption. It was unavoidable. Somebody was always going to ask about corruption.
Yes. Well, I think we have taken note of those comments, but I think corruption is it's a menace to development globally, and we cannot water it down. It has to be said as it is. And it is not in our national best interest that this is not addressed. We believe that value for money, public expenditure, and ensuring revenue that accrues to the state flows to the states is the best way forward. Because if you look at the amount of resources that are lost to Africa through illicit financial transactions, it far exceeds quintuple times the official development assistance flowing to Africa. That observation is noted, but efforts are being made through reforms. Some of those reforms are digitalization, use of third parties. Today, as we speak, if you go to the hospital, like RVTH, a bank will collect the revenue from you, and we've seen gains. So it's a work in progress, and this work in progress cannot be won overnight, but it's incumbent on every Gambian to also contribute to the discourse. And the more it is talked about, we believe the more it will be discouraged. And one useful observation we have now is there is a lot of open discourse, and people have the confidence to speak about literally holding government officials to account. I mean, I know of one platform that every minister literally want to be afraid of whether you mention on that. But the discussion should be ongoing. And the more it is discussed, the more it becomes an issue of concern. And that is one way of it serving as a deterrent.
Absolutely.
I think the citizens at large should take this on board and encourage all of us, including myself and everybody, to really turn the corner and try to implement the reforms that we have embarked on. We have digitalization, we have use of third parties, we have procurement efficiencies, and government is also working hard, to ensure that these views are taken on board. But we are not doing very badly in the corruption space. Mainly, what is happening is more discussion is taking place now than used to be the case.
True.
If you look at Transparency International ranking, in 2017, Gambia was ranked 120. As we speak last year, we are ranked 96. So we've moved notches. We've moved from 120 in 2017 to 96. So that's a couple of
24 good
24 countries.
Yes,
and we are not complacent by that. We believe this type of questions, particularly addressed to me, is welcome. And it cannot just stop there. I think the more it is discussed, the more it's talked about, the more it being noticed as a menace in society is noted. And it's like feedback mechanism.
Absolutely.
And that should be encouraged.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Seedy is making a lot of sense there, especially as it relates to public enterprises. So, there's somebody agreeing with you. Please ask the minister whether money realized from the gateway is now being collected by Gamtel or still by State House. During the regime immediately preceding Barrow, everything Gamtel was doing was being collected at State House. The question is that still the arrangement?
I will tell you, categorically clear, no. Gateway revenues are collected by the regulator, that is PURA. That is, it's not even in government. It is third party, it's a government entity, but it's outside the remit of the government. It is collected by PURA. And I think I need to take this opportunity to really, I'm not trying to say things that are not there. Anything I say can be verified. Even I forgot to make mention of that. They said the president's fish money is 150,000. I said, is he killing a cow every day? It is not true. But I mean, there's no harm. Our doors are open. A journalist could have written. What we allocate to the office of the president in terms of the household is far less than 150,000 daily, as they claim. And have been on the floor of the National Assembly respond to this, but still, you cannot just look at the upkeep of State House. You divide by the number of years. You say it's 150 daily. Oh, the president is spending this. No, that's not it. I think, the presidency is very prudent, and we are mindful of that.
So when you give the presidency so much money, that money is given for what? No, when we say
you have the whole state guard battalion.
Okay.
You have the ancillary service, you have the upkeep, the cleaning, the maintenance, a lot of things that are there. So it's not, I could not clarify this enough. And I'm in public space answering this transparently.
Okay. And what about the 200 million for entertainment?
No, actually, what 200 million they said is the whole of government. And don't forget, when we say entertainment, it doesn't mean every day we'll be beating Sabbath.
Yeah, exactly. I'm going
to we bring griots and say, let's make fun. No.
What type of entertainment?
In official business, like for example, if you receive an official guest,
yes,
you lodge him in a hotel. You take, you offer state banquets. You have like the recently concluded Independence, or national events. Those are entertainments. And even let us put things in context. As we speak today, our president is the chairman of OIC, the head of 57 Muslim majority member countries.
Yes.
By implication, one would expect either he moves out or a number of dignitaries visiting him, which are to be treated and given hospitality.
How many have come in so far?
Well, I don't keep track of the numbers. But
has anyone come in?
Yes, certainly. In fact, if the resource availability were there, the president would have been on the move.
He should have been on the move.
But I can tell you, this discussion was raised, and is the resource constraint? It's difficult to move a president.
So that's why he's not playing a part in the Gaza resolution.
No, he is doing a subtle diplomacy.
Yeah, but that's not filtering out to the public for us to know.
Yes, but what we are saying, imagine given that role, because the OIC is not giving the state money for the president to run his chairmanship. Running the chairmanship of OIC should be funded from your national budget. Imagine just a trip or two back and forth to the Middle East to do subtle diplomacy on this, which ideally should be the case. So I think when we do budget, we take into account the realities of the day. And that's what it doesn't mean that 200 million will be there to bring Jaliba and Sabar every day and make merry.
Okay. Text messages.
Yes.
Is it not the same government that is contributing to the mismanagement of those failing national institutions? Because it is the government that appoints the board and top management of these institutions, and of course the political interference by the executive and cabinet. You listed a number of.
I think those are legacies. But for now, as we speak, that's why we came up with the state-owned enterprises. There is laser focus on management of public enterprises, and I can say for sure, executive interference is at the very limited. Appointment of the board and the managing director of these institutions now follow a due process. We have all seen in newspapers advertisement for board members in a number of these SOEs. So where is the executive interference when a transparent recruitment process has been embarked on? Legacy-wise, we cannot say much about that, but going forward, we believe these reforms have been kicked in from 2024, and they will yield results.
Okay.
Yes.
Good morning to you, Uncle Peter, and the Minister. The UK has a GDP twice bigger than the whole African continent, and the population is over 60 million people. How can you compare the tiny little Gambia, one of the poorest countries in the world? If you put all our public companies in private hands, especially NAWEC, you are then putting it out of reach and very expensive for Gambians. Instead, the government should be making energy cheap by investing in renewables for our tiny population. You know, we floated this idea of privatizing NAWEC because, you know, wherever you go in the world, it's not the state that is producing some of these, social services. And, he has reason to worry.
No, I think his worries are well noted.
Yeah.
And they are
which is the argument of government
Yes.
all these years, from Jawara
No.
even Babili, Mansa, and
Yes,
now,
well,
that if you were to put water production in private hands, not everybody would have potable water.
No, I think his worries are noted, but we can also say the reforms and the policies of the government are just the right recipe for this situation. As we speak, we have an energy roadmap that is to diversify the energy source, which has started. We have just launched, for the first time in the history of this country, a 225 kVA. The transmission line used to be 33. So you have like almost 8-fold increase in the potential. Today, as we speak, we can pull power from as far as Guinea-Bissau, as far as Ivory Coast.
Guinea-Bissau is not far.
No, I mean Guinea-Conakry.
Okay.
You know, Ivory Coast we can, because we belong to West African Power Pool.
Yeah.
As a result, we have an energy purchase agreement with Electricity to Guinea, which will allow us to lift more than up to 30 megawatts during the dry season, and it can go up to 50 during the wet season because it's cheap hydroelectric power. We have a 5 megawatt solar farm in Jambur, and as we speak, procurement is afoot for the installation of 150 megawatt solar farm in Soma. First will be launched 50 megawatts that we believe, adding to our energy sources, will be able to meet national demand. And once the 100 megawatt come on stream, we belong to the OMVG network, and we can also export power.
Well, we are the basis of OMVG.
Yes, that's why we are leveraging on it.
That's our river.
Yes, and the payoffs are here. We've started benefiting from it now.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Good day, brother. What does the Honorable Minister have for the pensioners? He talks about the salary increment for civil servants, but why not the pensioners? Has he forgotten about the pensioners?
No, certainly not. Oh, sorry. Apologies. Yeah. They've not been left out. Nobody is getting a pension monthly less than 1,000. The all minimum pension for any retired civil servant is 1,000.
Minimum 1,000?
Yes.
That's not bad, though.
No, we've gone a long way.
That's not bad.
Yes, that's what this is like. And that's the reform we've done on the pensions area.
All right.
Yes.
Peter, tell your guest that those buses. Sorry, please tell your guest where are those buses, because every day people are crying about transport problem.
Well, I think the buses are here, 100 of them. We've procured jointly with Social Security. But what has happened, the bus fleet has been distributed across the country. Originally, the urban center used to have a large chunk of the bus fleet. But now you have bus service to Kiang, to URR, CRR. All the rural areas have bus services now, a large part of it. So equitable access to public transport and public facilities.
Well, the Greater Banjul area needs more.
Well, that is now, we've done our part. Let GTSC and Social Security step up and try to fill that void.
Fantastic. Good morning, Uncle Peter. Please ask the Minister about the revenue from the sand mining at Sanyang that Gach is exporting.
Well, I wouldn't have the numbers off my head, but I know there's a royalty agreement signed between him and the government in which he...
And you ensure that he pays all royalties?
Of course. That's by default. I anxiously look forward to that. And I even will follow up with my colleague Minister of Energy and Mines regularly. Yes, that's been paid. And it's paid on time.
Nani Juara, since he became minister, he hasn't called me once.
Well, I'll pass your message.
I've just exposed him. Good morning, Peter. In fact, these board of directors are the same people, like friends, that are rotating each other in different companies. The suggestion there is there's a mafia-like, approach to, setting up these boards. It's literally, from a tiny group that.
Okay. Well, that's good feedback to note, but we encourage every Gambian future opportunities when they arise for them to apply, and we'll ensure that the due process is followed.
So when government is about to set up, a board of governors or board of directors, they advertise vacancies.
Oh yes. Oh, HOE board positions are now advertised.
Okay.
Yes. And we encourage Gambians to apply. But by the way, we do not subscribe to that. If that is the observation, it's a feedback, and it will be taken on board.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Somebody just saying they sent a message via WhatsApp. Let's see. Oh, this is a long one. Good morning, Uncle Peter. But I think this was what Minister Seedy Keita told the National Assembly in November and not in October, that government is seriously challenged in implementing this year's 2024 national budget because there is no substantial budget support for development partners up to that hour. The minister made this revelation in response to members during the debate on the report of the Finance and Public Accounts Committee on the $52.9 billion budget estimates for 2025. It also came after several lawmakers complained that money is earmarked for sectors in this year's budget, for example, the education sector, are not adequately disbursed, hampering the operations of the school. And I think they are going, somebody is just calling a news report from some source.
Yeah, but I did mention that. As of that time, I laid before the National Assembly and gave it, but then we received it by the... In fact, the last budget support was received on the 30th of December, precisely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Kindly thank the gentleman for me. He's been very explicit and apt. However, privatizing NAWEC and soonest is the right way forward. This entity has and still continues to fail us throughout. Enough of excuses. Once again, thank this minister for being so clear and professional. So somebody was against privatizing NAWEC. Somebody is all for privatizing.
Well, that's public discourse. You cannot satisfy everybody.
No.
But just do what you believe is right. And it's backed by empirical evidence and backed by best practice and research. So that's what guides policy that we are doing.
This was a question sent in advance. Tomorrow, please ask Seedy Keita to explain the foreign exchange swap, how it works and how much it's going to cost us. This is after Africa 50, Afrexim Bank will also rip us off. This was in respect of the Afrexim. This was sent, as I said yesterday, following the conversation with Larry.
Well, currency swap are tools of trading in the financial market. What you do, you exchange cash flows. And how it does a currency swap works is you have dollars.
Yes.
Somebody has another currency.
Yeah.
And then you swap
so
them.
Afrexim has dollars. Gambia has dollars.
Afrexim Bank will give Gambia dollars. Gambia will give Afrexim Bank dollars.
Oh, okay.
Then those dollars will be invested in the Gambia. Then at maturity, the cash flows are reversed.
Say that again. Afrexim gives us dollars.
Yes, and then we give them dollars.
Okay.
Those dollars will be invested in Gambia. Upon maturity, Gambia will...
Invested as what? Treasury bills?
Yes. Whatever instrument they may deem is their money. Okay. Once you do a currency swap, that's how a transaction works. You swap cash flows at entry and reverse them at maturity over a defined period of time.
So the question is, what's the cost to us?
No, of course, that's valuing a swap, how you value a swap. And swap is valued by the interest rate differential between the two currencies and on which side you stand. I hope we don't go into the mathematics of it here, but that's how it is done.
Well,
if swaps are actually valued, and when you value a swap, it will tell you whether it's for you or against you. And I'm sure, as a government, we will not go into a swap that will be against us. Certainly, yes. But of course, It can reverse course during the swap lifetime, except unless you have locked the exchange rates at entry and at exit. Yes, thank you.
Good morning, Peter. It is understood that Al Bayrak is negotiating a loan from the China Exim Bank and using the port as collateral. Now, if they default, Exim Bank of China will take over the port and government would not be able to do anything about it. What safeguards have government taken against such?
The concession agreement does not envisage passage of title. So
what does that mean? So
let me explain.
Even if Al Bayrak intends to go to Exim Bank of China,
the port cannot be used as security because they don't have title. You can only use something as a security to a financial transaction over which you have title. But of course, when you are transacting with a bank, the bank can choose a suite of securities that will be ideal to them. Yeah. So what security is a function of the credit transaction between Al Bayrak and the potential bank they are dealing with. But one thing I know is title to the port of Banjul has not passed. Title is still vested in the Gambia and is not eligible for transfers.
Somebody just joining us with a keen interest. They missed when you were discussing Mega Bank, so I'll just ask the question, and please just oblige them. Good morning, Uncle Peter. Can you please ask the minister who they sold the Mega Bank to and how much, please?
Precisely, as I have said, KM Holding, and for $15,250,000 in December 2023.
Honorable Minister, we have about, 10 minutes? I don't know whether, you have issues you haven't touched on. You spoke about revenue collection. You spoke about how, through digitalization and what have you, GRA has gone from giving us hundreds of millions to now billions. Yes. Yeah, and what? Okay.
I think there's one area I wanted to clarify.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
They said the Ministry of Finance was allocated 2.41 billion, and that was deemed to be excessive. But of course, even a cursory look at the budget will tell you what the components of that ministry's budget is. Ministry of Finance has 11 subvented entities. Those are GRA, GBOS, State-Owned Enterprise Commission, MCC, FIU, now so several of them, just to name a few. And the total amount of resources in the budget for those subvented entities is 1.3 billion. So, in a nutshell, what is left to the Ministry of Finance, and also, IFMIS system of the government is under the Ministry of Finance budget. We pay 313 million for the IFMIS system. No, we pay 70 million for the IFMIS system, and for equity participation, that is for the government of the Gambia to maintain its shareholding in these international organizations. If you say you are a shareholder of African Development, you pay shares. ADB, World Bank, IFC, Islamic Development Bank, all these different organizations, those are called equity investments of the government. That comes about 250 million. So in a nutshell, the net amount that is residual to the ministry is only 700 million. And this includes staff of the Ministry of Finance under the Accountant General deployed in all the embassies. Because all the embassies have financial attaches and their remunerations are all part of that. Just to break it down for people to understand what the Ministry of Finance budget comprises. And we also have the PAM project. That is the Public Administration Project, which is to the tune of 313 million. It's also part of the Ministry of Finance.
What's this PAM project about?
It's the new World Bank project that will soon be launched. It is about modernizing the public administration. And this project will be implemented for the first time through government systems to ensure that we will be using the Accountant General, the Auditor General, the internal audit, instead of just setting up Project PIU, so that government system will be robust, reforms will be entrenched, and reliance can be placed on government systems.
Will that make government leaner?
Well, that's the whole point. That's the whole point. Leaner, smarter, and efficient.
Yeah, I'm all for a leaner government, this expansionary government thing, I'm against.
Okay.
While we are on the subject of, support from outside, MCC. There was a time when it was the sexiest word, in the, partnership domain.
Yes.
How has the arrival of Trump and his foreign policy, affected, our enthusiasm about the MCC?
Well, the MCC is funded by Congress, and with Trump at the White House, policies are under review. Still a work in progress as we speak. The MCC is at the compact development phase. That is, we are emphasizing on how the roadmap for the implementation of the MCC will be. Mm-hmm. So we are watching, and we are in touch with the MCC Corporation in Washington. And when we go for the spring meeting, we'll have additional insight.
Because at least, what, $20 to $25 million would have gone to NAWEC? We heard when Trump came...
MCA.
Okay.
You have two transactions with the MCC Corporation. Mm-hmm. There's the Millennium Challenge account, which is $25 million. And the MCC, that is the compact. That's the larger envelope.
Okay.
Yes, so that's
okay.
what's
Well,
happening.
MCC is MCC, yeah. Because Senegal was saying already they were, at risk of losing $500 million just for the energy sector alone.
Well, it is quite a development. We are all aware. But for us, we have not factored this in our budgets this year. And it's still, we consider it in the development phase. So we will watch and see what happens.
Yeah, we would like to know,
Certainly, we've not made any pronouncement as to the envelope that we will be getting or as to how that will be implemented. So it's still in the development phase, and we are observing developments.
Good morning, Uncle Peter. Please ask the Finance Minister about the agreement with the Norwegian-Gambian mining company to explore deep-sea mining opportunities. Again, a question for Nani. For Nani, perhaps. But, yeah. Well, this is news.
It is news. It was debated in Cabinet, discussed, and it was seen to be a viable investment opportunity. And it's a prospective mining license. So we hope and pray that the prospect materializes, and that will be good news. But at this stage, all we are saying is a prospective license that is under discussion. We cannot quantify what the value of the reserves will be or what the exit price or allocation is. Too infancy. It's at its infancy. But the good thing is government has opened up and invited potential interested bidders or explorer to prospect for these mines, for these resources. Yes.
Uncle Peter, can you ask the minister, when are we going to receive the remaining balance of the OIC cars? A lot of people believe we should have had, 100 cars? We got 89?
89 was the price, and we closed it at that.
It was never 100?
No.
Well,
we went out to procure 100. But we end up with 89, and that's where the price
Why
was.
89 is because
that was what was available.
Oh, that was what was available?
Yeah.
Not that was how much money we had?
No, it was what was available, and also the resource envelope. So we wanted to buy 100, but the resource envelope and the availability
could only finance 89.
So there's no car left to be delivered under the procurement of the OIC vehicle fleet. And in fact, by the way, that leads me to clarify. I have heard severally that we have allocated 800 million for vehicles.
Haven't you?
That's not true. What we have allocated is 800, but the 400 is for the areas of the OIC vehicles and 400 for additional new vehicles. It's not that we are buying additional 800 after the OIC.
Why do you need new vehicles? You cannot have used all the 89 vehicles.
No. These are different sectors. You see, when you look at the budget, all the subvented entities that are linked to the budget, not all of them will be able to get vehicles from the OIC fleet.
Fantastic.
Yes, thank you.
Seedy,
yes.
We have to be good now.
Well, thank you. I thank you so much, and your listeners. I'm sorry, but I think it's necessary to have this.
Okay, we're not complaining.
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate it. And once again, I thank you.
I told the Information Minister that the next time any minister is coming here to take more than 30 minutes, I'm going to charge for the extra time.
Well, it's a value. It's value for money. I think. I hope this clarification will help make people understand exactly what we are doing as a government.
It definitely will.
And I cannot conclude without thanking His Excellency the President for the leadership and the guidance he continues to offer us ministers and cabinet, and the foresight he's deploying in his leadership. We pray that the country continues to remain in peace, harmony, and the development trajectory that we are on. Even though some people claim, how is our development around 5% or 6% when the developed world?
Exactly. I mean,
how
did you arrive at this number? I think it's doing what, 5.9%?
I was surprised. Empirically, developing countries have a faster growth rate than developed countries. So you cannot look at world growth rate of 2 to 3% and you wonder why we are above that. Saying that means you don't know what development is like, because empirically developing countries have a lower base in terms of their size of the GDP. Any small increment tend to have a higher percentage mark. That's the law of numbers. And they have more investable areas. Today, our areas of investment is awash, from electricity, water, roads, digital. When you go to the West, those are not investable anymore. That's why, and our demographic opportunity dividend, we have a teeming youthful population. These are all aspects that further growth. So our growth numbers are not manufactured. They are verified. They are by different publication houses, from African Development Bank, World Bank, EIU, IMF. So for me to hear that, I wonder how they are saying that they are growing at 6% when the world is at 2-3%. To me, that was something I was not expecting.
All right.
Yeah,
Seedy,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a very good day.
Thank you.
He owed a great debt of gratitude to his boss, His Excellency, the President. My debt of gratitude, of course, goes to my sponsors, Jah Oil on YouTube.
In a world where progress never sleeps, one company stands out as the driving force behind infrastructure and energy solutions. Introducing our fuel company and cement producer, where excellence meets efficiency. Jah Oil. The company have 30 filling stations across the country that are all operating, which includes the recently completed Yarambamba and Old Yundum filling stations. And our rates are relatively cheaper than anyone else across the country. Along the years, Jah Oil introduces importation and distribution of cement in their line of business to diversify and strengthen their operations. Are you a cement retailer? At the moment, Jah Oil is the biggest producer and distributor of cement in the country with the most competitive prices in the market. With a focus on sustainability and innovation, we are paving the way for a greener, stronger future. Trust in us to fuel your projects and lay the groundwork for success. We currently produce over 25,200,000 bags per year. As the largest cement producer in the country, Jah Oil also targets to export cement to the neighboring countries like Guinea-Bissau, Guinea-Conakry, and others. Join us on our journey to shape a world where every drop of fuel and every bag of cement makes a difference. Together, we can build a brighter tomorrow.